arrays and objects, how to loop over arrays, how to get all of the keys out of an object, which gives you an array. We learned about for each. For each, according to the documentation, executes a provided function once for each array element. So if you want to do the same thing to every element in an array, like print a string that formats it a certain way for each one of those, or whatever you want to do, for each is your friend. There's a very similar function called map that was introduced in ES5. It creates a new array with the results of calling a provided function on every element in the calling array. So they both call a provided function on every element in an array. But while for each just calls that function, map takes the return value of that function and builds a new array out of it. Let's see about that. Let's go back up to our dinosaurs. So what if this were map instead of for each? Well, it did the same thing. It printed those things. But we know that it secretly also returned a new array. We just didn't do anything with it. So what if we do that? Const new array equals dinos.map, and then we console.log that array. That array is undefined, undefined, undefined. It still printed all three of those things. But why is it undefined, undefined, undefined? We're not returning anything, right? We're just console logging. What if instead of console log, we return that string? Yeah, then we get an array with all three of those strings that we built. Whoops. So if we wanted to do something other than console log them, we could do it that way. Groovy? So map and for each will both call a function for every item in an array. Map will also return an array of the return values. So you could use map pretty much everywhere you would use for each. But there are some things you can do with map that you can't do with the other. And I suppose there's no point in having it return that array if you're not going to do anything with it. But they're very similar functions. And once we get into React, we're going to use map a lot. I'm just kind of in the habit of using map whenever I want to do something to every item in an array. Because if you don't use the return value, you're still not really hurting anything. And it's just sort of the habit I'm in. But they do basically the same thing. One returns something, one doesn't. Groovy? All right. That is array map very briefly. There's some others that you might be interested in. Filter and reduce are also really good array functions to know. Map, filter, and reduce were all introduced at the same time, and they're all really useful. So if you want to do a little extra research, filter and reduce are really useful things. Filter goes through, heck, let's just look it up. Filter creates a new array with all elements that pass the test implemented by the provided function. So if you only want the ones that start with D, you could write a function that returns true or false based on whether that string contains the letter D. And then filter would give you the array with only those items in it. So all the items for which the provided function returns true. Reduce is a little more complicated. It applies a function against an accumulator and each element in the array from left to right to reduce it to a single value. What? Well, we're not using it right now, so we're not going to get into it. But read that. It's really powerful. It might be just the thing sometime. Yeah, Elijah.
There's a syntax that I was wondering about that is used in these functions sometimes.
Okay.
It's this equal sign and
And then a greater than sign?
Yeah.
Haha, we're going to learn about that. An arrow function. We're going to learn about that maybe yet this afternoon, at the very latest tomorrow morning. But I hope this is morning still. Whatever. We might get to it yet this morning, or we might get to it tomorrow morning, but we're going to get to it soon. Good question. It's a different syntax for arrays for functions that was introduced in the ES6. And the only reason we haven't done it yet is because we're going to point out exactly what the difference is doing it that way. All right. So we'll go back to our project and see if we can use our new tricks to do something cool.